Hello, my wonderful friends. It's time. Time for part 3. Time for the final part. Our wonderful friend, despite the darkness, brings us my Legbeard ex-friend, part 3, the finale. I had to say it all dramatic, like, because it's the finale. Anyway, I'm just going to read the story now. Hi, friends. First of all, thank you so much to Moonhorse for reading my story. Well, thank you for sharing it with us. That means a lot. And to the Moonherd for all of your comments. I didn't think my story would be this well received. It has been therapeutic to be allowed to tell everything. Before I get right into what will hopefully be the last page of this story of Ranger, I just want to clarify a few things. Firstly, I 100% do believe now that Ranger had some sort of untreated mental illness. For most of the events that happened, I was way too young to fully grasp the possibility, but it definitely crossed my mind later into our friendship. Unfortunately, hindsight is always 20/20. I don't actually think Ranger is a bad person deep in her core, which I think makes the story more complicated for me. When I read Neckbeard stories, I find most of them are such brief encounters that the beard comes across like a villain. But to me, Ranger was a friend for all of us in this story. She frustrated me, and in the end, she did do some really petty and awful things, but she wasn't always bad. For the things she did, and the absolute nonsense she put me through, there was also a pretty fun person when she wanted to be. She could really make me laugh. I remember a lot of moments where she, Luna, and I spent summer nights camped out on Luna's back porch, watching the stars and talking all night, and teenaged me believed that these two were my ride-or-die friends. I thought Ranger was a friend I'd have all my life. So while her story is a bit cringy at times, I also find it really bittersweet. I can 100% relate to that. That's how a lot of my personal Neckbeard stories are, which is why, some of them aren't just bad thing happened to Beard. They were my friends. So, no, I feel that, dude. Another thing I think maybe I should have explained, because it'll answer the inevitable "why didn't you just hang out with someone else" question. I was a goth back in the early 2000s. That was kind of the post-Columbine years when alt people were generally assumed to be a mix of either criminals, drug addicts, or potential troublemakers. Feel that? Yep. Same here. I also happened to live in a town that had a huge religious population. Oh, same. Christians specifically. So when I entered high school dressing how I did, I was assumed to be a devil-worshipping, drug-dealing troublemaker. So when I say that I was shocked that I'd found even 2 friends, I mean it was unlikely that I would have friends, period. One of Ranger's and Luna's biggest redeeming qualities is that neither of them gave a fuck about the way I dressed. It was nice being able to express myself without worrying about somebody. Hence why, even though my friendship was rough with Ranger, I stuck it out for a long time. And now, to the story itself. So when we left off, I just returned home. I was in a depressive slump due to the years of abuse my ex put me through, and generally feeling like garbage. For the first year and a bit, Ranger mostly kept me at arm's length while I found work and rebuilt my life from the ground up. We talked and hung out a bit, but the worst of it hadn't quite happened yet. One thing that did keep happening more was Ranger bailing on us. A lot of the time, Luna and I would agree to meet for stuff like dinner or the movies or just grab a coffee and hang out. But Ranger had really been sucked into her Power Ranger fanfiction by then and would often ignore our phone calls and text, reminding her that we're supposed to meet up. More than once, Luna or I, or sometimes both of us, would be stuck waiting somewhere for Ranger, only for her to tell us long after we're supposed to meet, "Oh yeah, can't make it, sorry." I'm not proud of myself for the way I handled some of these, because I was really sharp and not at all adverse to directly calling her out. More than once I told her that she really needed to be honest if plans wouldn't work out. I told her that I'm sick of wasting my fucking time and making me feel like a complete fool by having me wait at restaurants and coffee shops only for her to just not show up. Ranger would always tell me that she honestly just forgot, but Luna was being fed a different story. We'll get to that. As an aside, at this time, while Ranger wasn't really a smelly person, her hygiene was starting to spiral a bit. She still didn't brush her teeth and had taken to wearing the same 2 or 3 shirts every day. She smelled really stale because she often didn't dry her laundry after washing it, and I did notice that her hair seemed to be a lot more greasy now. Ew. I think mostly because she rarely cut it and didn't know how to really take care of such long hair. Ranger was also a lot more indifferent about grossing me out at this point. Like, I remember one day when we were at a park sitting at a picnic table, she just sat up on the table, took her shoes off, and put her feet right next to my fucking face until I told her to move. I learned that day that she also didn't really change her socks much. Sorry for the visual grossness. Yeah, remember what I said about that mentality being stuck in high school in the last video? Her obsession with Power Rangers was in full bloom, and for a lot of the time she only ever wanted to talk about them when we hung out, even though Luna and I weren't really big fans and had little to say on the topic. Her tendency to steal was now also so bad that Luna and I had simply had this unspoken agreement not to leave her alone when she's at our houses. Though she still managed to get caught stealing money from me once and attempted to try and steal a charger for Luna's headphones. I really can't tell if this constant theft was just compulsion or her way of acquiring things she couldn't afford. I think Ranger had the idea in her head that Luna and I were easily able to buy things when she just took them and likely justified stealing as, well, they could just get a new one. I rarely visited her home anymore because, frankly, I was tired of how gross it was. By then, Ranger's room had a thick layer of dust to go with the rest of the mess, and there were still sticky spots all over where she had spilled Coke. Sunflower seeds were there too, of course, though now they were in random cups everywhere in her room, so at least she had made some improvements. Guess there's that. Another thing I must emphasize is that by now Ranger was very much driven by her victim complex. She was adamant about not talking to either Luna or I about any of our problems and had developed a total aversion towards conversing about anything that did not revolve around either herself or her interest. There were brief pockets of time where this would ease, but according to Luna, there were a lot of, well, you don't have my life going on behind the scenes as well. Luna had a parent that was seriously ill for the remainder of our friendship, and one of the threads that started to unravel her bond with Ranger was that Ranger was so adamant about her me and only me frame of mind that Luna had all but stopped conversing with her about personal matters. Halloween. The first shoe drops. So the first incident in the downfall of our trio was on Halloween after I moved back to town. As I mentioned before, Luna, Ranger, and I all liked horror films. A few months prior, we all got into a conversation where we reminisced about the movie nights we had in high school, in which we'd gorge on chips and pop while watching horror movies all Saturday night together. We decided to say, fuck it, why not do it again for old time's sake? It had been ages since we had a proper hangout, and we all needed some night of bullshittery. So a plan was made. We'd meet at my place, I'll chip in some money for pizza and snacks. We'd then watch a bunch of movies and just shoot the shit. Now, Luna and I were well aware that with us working all the time, it made it way easier for us to chip in than Ranger, who was still not employed. So when it came time to planning who would pay for what, we agreed that we'd pay the larger share in order to make things a little bit easier on Ranger. She only had to bring $10, and we told her that she could bring all the movies that she wanted, which was something Ranger could do for free as she had an expensive DVD collection handy. For the next few months, we checked in. Luna reminded Ranger and asked her if she was still okay with the arrangement. Ranger insisted she was. She swore each time that Luna checked in on her that she was good to go and couldn't wait for the night. So Halloween rolls around. I clean the apartment and wait. Luna turns up. We catch up while we wait. Ranger's a little late, but we chalk it up to her usual tardiness. Don't worry too much. 30 minutes passes. Then an hour. Almost 2 hours late, Luna gets a text from Ranger saying, oh, she's on her way. She had been reading fan fiction and just lost track of time. I missed the bus from her place to mine as a result. Luna, rightfully annoyed, asks, well, can we order the pizza now so it gets here when you do? You can give Salt your share whenever you get here. And this is when Ranger reveals that no, she had no intention of chipping in. In fact, she had never intended to ever chip in and just didn't bother to say anything. When Luna reminded her that she'd asked her several times leading up to the day, Ranger launched into a long pity party. She claimed that it was just too hard and that she was just too broke, and proceeded to tell Luna, well, bring a box of mac and cheese so if I beg Salt, she'll loan me a pot and water so I can cook it and not starve. Wow. Luna lets me know, and I flip because, quite frankly, I was getting sick of Ranger's head games. While we waited for Ranger, Luna and I had a conversation about her, where Luna revealed that Ranger now had a new habit of running to her anytime she had planned to bail on us like this. She would describe me to Luna as a scary person that terrified her. Salt had such a violent temper, I'm too scared to say no to her, to justify why she would often bail on us or just outright lie. Luna now realized, after hearing my side, that Ranger was actually just covering her own ass when she lost track of time and missed our arranged meetups. I think it was because I called her out a lot more than Luna did, but Ranger just decided from then on that any anger on my part, no matter what the reason was proof that she and Luna were caught in the crosshairs of my violent outbursts. Oh, brother. I cannot say I handled this well. I did have little patience back then, and at times I did raise my voice when Ranger started her bad antics. After her reaction to my abuse story, I developed this zero-tolerance policy for her that made me a lot blunter than I was before. I just didn't hold it in when Ranger frustrated me. I told her directly, and I don't think Ranger knew how to handle the fact that I was no longer just tolerating her antics anymore. I'm not sure why she went with the angle that I was violent. I assume because I had expressed anger about her behavior already and told her off a lot more than Luna had. Either way, it was the thing that she'd stuck with from then on that became her thing. She wasn't being unreasonable, I was just unstable and scary. Looking back on all this feels really silly because even Luna knew it was bullshit, but back then it sure did chap my ass. I think Ranger knew as such because I was sensitive about violence in general after leaving my ex, so being accused of being violent was just about the most aggravating thing she could have done to me. The last con. A few years went by, and while Ranger did do some minor shit, I don't think any of it is truly worth mentioning. It was just more of the same, really. Ranger feeding Luna stories about my wild temper that scared her oh so much, while I was getting fed a story about how Luna was a fool for making a bunch of terrible choices. Luna at the time had just gotten a job in another city, her commute was long, and for some reason, this constantly unemployed Ranger had a bug up her ass about what a poor decision that was. She never said it to Luna, of course, just to me. So eventually I was stable enough to really take a look at my life, and I realized I'd gutted my interest when I was with my ex. I hadn't cosplayed in years, and I missed the joy of going to cons. I felt a bit awkward, seeing as I was now an adult in my mid-20s, but I decided that I needed to put myself back out there. It was time to make friends, and it's time to start doing what made me happy. So I decided to go back to the cons. I attended a few small events largely on my own before finding out about a big con that took place during the summer in the nearest city. I'd had lots of fun at the events that I'd already been to, but the one thing I really missed was attending cons with a friend. Luna agreed that she could swing at least one or two of the days, but she'd be meeting me there as she dropped the exciting news that she was just moving in a few months to that city. The commutes were too long and Luna's job was really kicking off. She didn't want to leave, but after crunching some numbers, realized it was actually cheaper to just move there rather than suffer the long commute. I congratulated her and asked Ranger. Ranger was lukewarm about Luna's news and my suggestion, but eventually agreed when I explained I'd planned to get a hotel room so we could both chip in so we'd be right near the con. There would be a third person staying with us too, so it would be almost like the old days. At the time I expressed to Ranger that I needed her to put at least half of her part of the rooms down before March of that year. I'd learned my lesson with Ranger and hoped that putting her on a payment plan, it would make things much more doable. She agreed, and things were smooth for the next few months. Don't fuck with my sleep. So somewhere in between the date of the con and the previous event, Ranger had the misfortune of losing her cat. He was a lovely little sir that I remember just being the sweetest little thing, but he was unfortunately very up there in years, 18 or 19 I think, and it was his time to go. Ranger was saddened by this, as she had every right to be. Luna comforted her in the day he passed and spent a while just talking with her about it. I wasn't told about his passing by Ranger all day or evening, so I was unaware until about 1 a.m., when I was awoken by a series of messages from Ranger expressing her grief. I was confused as I had no idea what was going on, but I tried my best to respond to her, eventually However, I told Ranger that while I was trying to be understanding, it was very late and I had to work the next morning. I could talk to her later, but I really needed to rest. Ranger apologized, but I later learned that she did this to Luna as well. In fact, Ranger would wake us up both multiple times despite the fact that she knew both of us worked and what our schedules are. Tension mounted between her and Luna because Luna was getting frustrated with Ranger's self-centered attitude. She hated that no matter how many times Ranger was reminded, she would keep waking both of us up. Luna was sick of going to work tired because of Ranger. This led to what was arguably the biggest fight Ranger and Luna ever had. I don't remember exactly what set it off, but it was mostly Luna messaging Ranger over our shared Discord that she was tired of Ranger's bad attitude. The two of them got into a serious argument over the fact that Luna was upset by how callous Ranger had been over a family member of Luna's being seriously ill. From what I remember, Ranger sort of brushed Luna off when she tried to reach out to her, while also demanding comfort for the loss of her cat. She called Ranger out on being selfish, pointed out how manipulative she had been recently, and told her that she was fed up with Ranger's behavior. Luna was tired of Ranger complaining about being broke and getting passive-aggressive anytime Luna and I brought up our jobs. She brought up that Ranger had done the same thing to her when she confided one of her parents was gravely ill that she had done to me when I left my ex. Not listened, ignored anything Luna said, and responded with, "Well, at least you don't have my life." Luna was not willing to just ignore how unsympathetic Ranger had been to both of us, and was fully sick of having to suppress problems because Ranger only ever wanted to talk to us about herself. I chimed in, pointing out that Ranger had a long history of twisting things to the point where she ended up hurting us both. I pointed out how bad her victim complex was, that she jeopardized Luna and I's job by making us lose sleep, that she didn't seem to empathize with the fact that we both needed our jobs to pay our rent and bills, and being tired so often put us both at serious risk. That was when Ranger said the single phrase that made Luna drop her like a lead weight. "Well, I'm sorry I wasn't head at a job like you were." Wow. Fucking wow. That made me freeze up. I had returned to our town after leaving my ex with nothing to my name. My ex kept everything, our apartment, furniture, everything of value. I came back into Luna and Ranger's lives with a few boxes of clothes and my cats. I had to literally start my life over again. I didn't so much as own a stick of furniture. I worked my ass off for years to get my apartment and to have all the things in it. Nothing was just handed to me. I worked to earn every bit of it. Luna similarly came from a very toxic family life and had to scrape and scrape to move into the city because she wanted a better life. She'd worked long hours to afford the move, and I was proud of her because for years so many people didn't think she'd ever do it. I was done with Ranger's antics that night, and I told her just fuck off, because I had zero patience for her nonsense. She promptly told me, "Oh, I was referring to Luna," to which Luna lost her fucking shit. She left the shared chat, and Ranger immediately tried to manipulate me by proclaiming how easy Luna had it living out in the city. I again told her to fuck off, that it didn't matter which one of us her shitty comment was directed towards, it was still a terrible thing to say regardless. Luna and I had started talking in private, and that's how we learned that Ranger had been pitting us against each other secretly for possibly years. Basically, whenever Ranger suspected one of us was annoyed with her, she would run to the other and make up stories in order to get them to take her side. She relied heavily on the tactic of implying that Luna was spoiled or stuck up with me, and stretched the truth about how supposedly rude Luna was. She omitted details like how Luna wasn't stuck up, that she was sick of being fucking spammed in the middle of the goddamn night, or that she couldn't hang out as often because she lived in another city. With me? Well, she amped up her implications about how scared she was of me. Apparently, whenever she'd bail on us the whole time, she'd secretly been texting Luna, and she was scared of what I'd do, and accused me of, and I quote, verbally beating her. Really, dude? Now, I don't think Ranger meant to imply what she did, but again, I was sensitive to the issue because of my ex. Totally understandable. I think what she actually meant is that I attacked her a lot or that I was bullying her somehow. But it came across to me, and Luna for that matter, as an accusation that I was actually abusing her. It was something that genuinely hurt me. I had always hated what had happened to me and would never want to inflict that kind of pain onto another person. The fact that Ranger saw no issue with trying to convince Luna that I was an awful person stung a lot more than I think she ever intended. I didn't even know how to respond at first. Luna, however, was completely done. She told me under no circumstances did she ever want to speak to Ranger again, as she felt that this had crossed a serious line. Things were quiet for about a day or two after that, at least until Ranger suddenly added us both into a new chat. She started off with small talk, asking about our days and how we were, confusing the hell out of me at the time. Luna saw right through this charade and did not hide that she wasn't having it. She told Ranger that she was done and that Ranger was not going to pretend that nothing happened earlier. She left the chat and promptly blocked Ranger on everything. Ranger's response to Luna's departure? Telling me, "Well, I'm gonna need that money back from you, then." At the time, I had some money Ranger had given me as a down payment for the con we planned to go to. She was a month late giving it to me, of course, but I kept it handy as until now, because I assumed things were going to go as planned. When she said this, I suspect that she was hoping I would panic and somehow try to make Luna talk to her. I guess under the threat of the fact that I'd have to cover her part too if I didn't comply? I don't know. I saw right through this manipulation, luckily, and, well, I replied with, "Okay, tell me where you'd like to meet and I'll give it back." And that was it. Ranger logged off, and that was the last time all three of us spoke. But things were not yet over for Ranger and I. The end. Ranger was dead silent for months afterwards. During that time, I canceled the hotel booking, made arrangements to stay with Luna instead. I reminded her several times that I still had her money and asked when she'd like to arrange for me to return it, but Ranger never responded. Our would-be third party had also backed out at the last minute, so I spent the next little while generally pissed off and venting to Luna, who had cut all contact with Ranger outright. I'm not proud of myself for the way I acted then. I was angry and hurt that two people had pulled the rug out from underneath me and given me so little time to make alternative plans. I told Luna that I genuinely felt like Ranger had tried to scam me, and it seemed like she conveniently forgot about paying me right up until I pushed the issue. I focused on the con to keep my mind off of things and decided that it was time that I took a vacation to relax and get over this burnout. I was drained from work and the stress from a lot of other family drama, and decided that after this con, I was going to head out on a solo trip. Luna was excited to see me take this level of initiative and wished me well. She dropped the exciting news that she had been able to book time off and would join me for the whole con. The month of the con, Ranger messaged me, breaking her silence to ask if I still had the hotel booked. I said no, somewhat confused, as she literally asked for her down payment back the last time we even spoke. She got upset and asked, "Well, why did you do that?" I had to explain that day to her and remind her of what she had said. She wanted her money back, so I obviously wasn't going to keep the hotel booking, as I'd be paying for a room on my own at this point when it was meant for 3 people. Ranger brushed off my points, insisting that she never meant it that way. She was upset. She was proclaiming that she never told me she didn't want to go. I simply explained that her requesting her money back was all the confirmation I needed, and that she couldn't do that and still expect me to hold her place in the off chance that she may have changed her mind. I was firm about the fact that her saying she takes it back doesn't magically undo what she said. She was being completely unreasonable about this. I once again told her that I still had her money whenever she would like it back. I'd be happy to meet up and give it to her. Ranger again logged off, and I didn't hear back from her for another few weeks. The con came and went. I had a great time. Then I got on a plane and flew off to a week's worth of pina coladas and lounging by a pool. It was the perfect vacation, and I had a blast posting all over my social media about the fun I was having. I'd made a new friend at the con and felt totally at ease for the first time in years. Ranger did not contact me throughout my entire vacation, and I suspected she was upset that I had still canceled the hotel room on her. I wasn't really worried. It was honestly nice to not have to deal with her constant complaining, to tell you the truth. What I didn't realize is that all the while I was enjoying my trip, Ranger had muted me on her social media and was spinning another narrative for our mutual friends to read. She implied that I had stolen her money. Not overtly, mind you, but according to mutual friends, she essentially posted how I owed her money and she was trying to work up the courage to ask for it back. Without any other context, of course, several people took this as an accusation of theft, and soon several of our mutual friends were asking Luna whether or not it was true that I had stolen it. All the while, I had no idea this was going on. To make things worse, I was flaunting a fun vacation. I genuinely think that Ranger timed this purposefully, allowing the lie to spin itself for her. She would later deny ever saying anything, but she was clever enough to likely realize that people who knew both of us could fill in the gaps the way that she wanted them to. All they saw was Ranger's plight of me owing her money, and me partying on a beach. It did not look good from an outsider's perspective, and I am fairly certain that Ranger purposefully wanted it to be this way. So, blissfully ignorant me gets on a plane a week later, flies home, to which Luna quickly intercepts me with a, "Hey, just a heads up, but Ranger's going around on social media implying that you stole money from her and you might want to be careful." I am confused as hell. I had tried multiple times to return her money. It was still safe and sound on my dresser at home. It was then that Luna dropped the other bomb. A mutual friend of ours had seen someone post on one of Ranger's posts. Well, they weren't direct, but basically heavily implied they planned to assault me. Why? Because they thought that I had stolen from her. Yes, Ranger was so caught up in her own fucking victimization that she was literally sitting back and allowing people to imply that they were going to harm me over a lie that she had told about me. Not once did she ever correct herself. She simply compounded the idea that she was too scared to confront me for her money, angering her audience and spinning this public deception of me as some thief who had run off on vacation after robbing my own friend. I promptly lost my shit. I immediately texted Ranger when I got home and demanded that she meet me somewhere so I could give her damn money back. I was fed up. I was furious that she had gone around trying to manipulate our friends behind my back. Ranger at first pretended not to know what I was talking about until I sent her screenshots our mutual friends had provided me. There was a lot of bickering between us that night. I won't go into it because a lot of it's personal details that came up. But by the end of it, I sat back for the first time. I just didn't care. It was a bitter feeling, but the truth is that I no longer felt worried about holding on to Ranger's friendship. My mind recalled the events of the last few years and realized that nothing was getting better. Ranger refused to work, refused to grow up, refused to take on any adult responsibilities, and simply entrenched herself in deepening her own victim complex. I realized also that I could not make her get out of it, so I logged off. That night, Ranger treated me to a final disturbance, waking me up with a series of messages in which she simply complained about the loss of Luna's friendship and how hard things were for her, and then accused me of being a predator. Fucking what? Now, what I think Ranger was trying to imply was that I was bullying her. However, I think she purposefully used those word choices because they were dramatic and ambiguous. Essentially, she implied that I had been preying on her for years, and in fact had been doing so since the day we met. What an absolute fucking asshole. And I lost my shit. Again. Absolutely flipped the fuck out. I am not proud of my reaction. I'm embarrassed by just how angry I was. I now know that it was just her trying to manipulate a situation. But at the time, all I could think about was how my own friend had just accused me of something that horrible. I blocked Ranger on Discord that night. The next day I told her that she was going to get her money back from me one way or another. I was fed up. I was utterly fuming at this point. She didn't answer my first few messages. It wasn't until I told her that I would go to the police if I didn't hear back from her, as I was no longer going to tolerate her carrying on this narrative that I had stolen from her while at the same time dodging my attempts to return her damn money. Ranger at first gave me all of her classic excuses. She was babysitting, doing chores, much too busy. I offered an alternative time, and even offered to finally have a third party collect from me and then give it to her. It was then that Ranger finally admitted the first honest thing I think she'd ever told me in years. I was just holding this off because I hope we could finally meet up later and talk this all out. Yeah, I'm not having it. Eventually, I resorted to simply transferring the amount I owed her to her bank account. Last time I ever spoke to Ranger was when I sent a screenshot of proof that she had been paid back her money. I told her right then that she was responsible for destroying her friendship with both myself and Luna, and that I no longer wanted to hear from her, and that we were not friends. I blocked her on my remaining social media immediately after. I know this isn't the big climactic end that some of you may have expected. In a lot of stories I read, there's usually this dramatic conclusion, but Ranger's friendship with me ended less an explosion, but more of a sad whimper. It was fitting, actually, because Ranger, as awful as she had been, was once somebody I did care for. Looking back on everything now, I get a strange, disquieting feeling. I think the reason I wanted to tell this story is because I wanted people to know one important thing. That as funny as Legbeard and Neckbeard stories are, these are still people. Not all of them are necessarily bad. Ranger at her core is not a bad person. I think that deep down inside she has the capacity to be kind. The tragedy of our story together is that her good parts eventually got outweighed by all the bad. Ranger ultimately was a hard lesson for me about learning when someone is no longer worth keeping in your life. Ranger was mentally ill. This, I think I can safely say, was likely the case. And she likely struggled with this for years, all while I knew her. It was the cause of many of her problems. I do agree with everyone who speculated that. It is true that Ranger had her own issues, but it's also still true that problems or not, she still hurt Luna and I. I held on, in my opinion, for far too long, expecting Ranger to eventually change. But she never did. That is a choice that she made for herself, for better or for worse. It took a long time for me to realize that you can't make people improve themselves no matter how badly you want them to. That choice has to come from within. If there's anything I hope that you take away from my story, it's this. That it is okay to walk away when you have a friendship that is toxic. That you're not obligated to keep someone in your life just because you have a history. Sometimes you make friends and they just don't last. That's fine. Not everyone you meet will be part of your life forever. I see Ranger still from time to time, walking around town, still babysitting, still living in the same place she did before. She has a job now because I ran into her during Christmas, but it's a dead-end one, very clearly not what she wanted to do in life. I feel sorry for her in a lot of ways, because I think if she had gotten the help she needed sooner, none of this would have happened. And because it's hard to truly hate someone that's part of your life for that long. She wasn't always a terrible friend. She had big dreams. I once hoped that she'd achieve them. But in the end, she didn't. I don't know where her life's going, or if she'll ever get out of the slump she's in. But I do know that, despite everything, I wish her well. I hope she gets away someday. I hope that there is a time where I walk past her on the street and we both smile because we're exactly where we want to be. I'll never forget the ways that she made me laugh. There will always be a small part of me that will still be there all those years ago on a cold summer night, sitting with her and Luna, just watching the stars. As a side parting note, everyone asked about the Ouija board story, and I don't want to end this story on a sad note, so here goes. I was looking at a Ouija board in a store one day, like 3 or 4 years before Ranger and I cut ties, and Ranger got all agitated about it. Ouija boards weren't really my thing, but I did like the aesthetic of them, so I kind of wanted to get one just so I could set it up as a decoration of some sort. Ranger, while we were strolling the store, told me how I needed to stay away from them because they're dangerous. According to her, she had been going home one night and happened to see one at a bus stop. Without thinking, she had touched it and proclaimed that in doing so, she ended up being cursed by the board. Because of this, she apparently saw ghosts, including the ghost of her uncle. What? She never actually explained how it cursed her. I guess she was going by that whole idea that if you use one alone, bad shit happens. But I guess it just took one touch from poor Ranger for this thing to unleash some batshit negative energy into her. She claimed that her uncles haunted her a lot over the years like that and followed her around. I don't know. But she never answered my question about how they specifically came to her through the Ouija board. I guess she thinks that they're like a public bus stop for ghosts or something. Oh, and of course, this board was never seen in her room, or otherwise she would have given me a straight answer about what the fuck she apparently did with it. I don't think she realized how they're supposed to actually work, or she'd seen too many horror movies by that point. I remember jokingly telling Luna after all of this shit between us went down that I was going to buy a Ouija board and leave it on her porch just to scare the shit out of her. I didn't, as it turns out I'm not nearly as much of an asshole as Ranger wanted me to be. And yes, she totally blamed me for some of her bad luck on this curse that the board inflicted on her, by the way. It was probably the most hilarious claim Ranger has ever made, because the entire time she was saying it, I was picturing that one steamed ham scene in The Simpsons. It's basically how our entire conversation went down. You found a Ouija board in this Christian-oriented town in the middle of the day with nobody else around, just sitting there, unattended, all by itself, and it just so happened to be cursed with magical ghost-seeing abilities.
Yes.
That's it?
No.
Anyhow, that concludes my story. I'm glad you were also interested in hearing it, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you. Ooh, boy. That's a hell of a story, and what a way to end it, too. Yeah, I can totally understand cutting ties after all that shit. I can 100% understand having to get away from somebody who was just like that. I have my own Neckbeard stories. Several of you have already heard them. I've made videos about them. But yes, I totally understand where you're coming from with this, Salt. There are times, like, I tell in my own stories, I tell the, hilarious, weird antics of all the Neckbeards I knew, the silly things that they've done, the crazy circumstances and fights and arguments and whatever. But at the end of the day, we were friends. So there were a lot of good times, too. There were a lot of times where we'd laugh about things, where we'd go, like, hilariously over the top about some video game stuff or something like that, and just had a generally really great time. So I can understand where you're coming from. In a lot of Neckbeard stories, as I've said, I think in the first one of these, and in several others, it's a lot of, like, an encounter with a Neckbeard. Someone who doesn't actually know them ends up meeting this person at, like, through a friend or at a store, or, like, an event or something like that, and then has to deal with them. But they can always come across as kind of like this weirdo or this kind of, I guess, villain or whatever in the story, because they don't really know this person. It's different when you actually know them, because they are people. That is a thing. And as funny as a lot of their antics can be, a lot of them are, really disturbed individuals. A lot of them are people who have issues. And that's why when we talk about it, I always stress the idea of the Fed aura. It's not the fact that someone looks some way or dresses some way or has the same kind of hygiene or anything like that, because those can also be symptomatic of a bunch of other things. It's very much understanding the mindset of the Neckbeard or the Legbeard in question. Their very specific, horrible mindset, much like Ranger here, with a lot of victim complex, a lot of blaming, manipulation, and very cruel things. Yes, a lot of what Ranger went through in her own life was probably really bad. However, that does not justify you doing it to someone else. I've always said this when it comes to wanting someone to change, and especially when it comes to, like, having to deal with really negative things like that in relationships, be they friendships, romantic, or otherwise. As much as you can do what you can to help someone, you are never fully responsible for someone else's mental health. I, for example, have on multiple occasions explained to all of you I have major or chronic depressive disorder. I have really bad problems with that. However, as much as I enjoy the sympathy, as much as I appreciate and care about all of you saying how much, like, oh, I'm so sorry and you can get over that, I do appreciate that. But I know at the end of the day there is one person who needs to actually work on it the most. And that's me. I can appreciate all of your kind words. I love and adore Sango support so much, but if I myself am not willing to do anything about it, then it doesn't get done. Nobody else can fix it but me. And the same thing goes with Ranger and her issues. Salt, you and your friend Luna did above and beyond trying to help this person. Trying to get her to see that what she was doing, how she was behaving, all of these things are not the way to get better, not the way to move ahead, not the way to, like, reach that goal or that success in life that you really, really want. But she just didn't want to do it. For whatever reason, she intentionally sabotaged herself in order to keep those things from happening. And there can be multitudes of reasons. You know, I could speculate for days, but that doesn't make any one of them any more accurate. But at the end of the day, I think what you two had to do was what you had to do. I understand that there is no, like, you know, this isn't like some other Neckbeard stories where it's just like grr, anger, and oh, curse that beard and stuff like that. It's more like, you know, I hope someday she gets better. And I mean, I do too. Some of the stuff that she said and did was pretty horrible, and that does make me pretty upset. But I genuinely do hope that a lot of the people that, you know, we talk about do actually get the help that they need and do get better. It's, you know, it's really sad. Nobody should have to live like that. But sadly, a lot of people do. So, I don't know. I guess really what I'm saying is we hear a lot of Neckbeard stories. And as some of them can be really bad, you know, some of them do things that are completely unforgivable. You know the kind. You know the things that we particularly hate on this channel. But you do hope that they get better. You hope that the ones who aren't that level of horrible, the ones who are just like, you know, some nerdy guy who really likes that overcoat that he got from his grandmother for Christmas and doesn't take as many showers as he honestly should have, eventually gets over whatever depression is keeping him from doing that. Or that Legbeard who keeps going to all the anime conventions but is constantly worried about why she can't get a boyfriend, even though it's because her incredibly, like, controlling mentality is what keeps driving them off, that she eventually gets over that. Like, these are all things that you can overcome, but you have to be willing to try. And I really hope that everything does work out in the end. I know a lot of you are probably expecting my, you know, different levels of just raging anger, but I'm not feeling that with this one. I'm feeling honestly kind of sad. And I do hope that things get better. But I am glad that you, Salt, and your friend Luna are doing much better in your lives. You deserve that. And you did work really hard to get where you are. And, if nothing else, one space unicorn is proud of you. I'm proud of all of you guys, actually. I love you all so very, very much. And, you know, if you want to send me a story, my subreddit is in the description of this video, as well as some other stuff, things to keep the channel going, all that good stuff. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. This was a long story. I think I'm gonna go take a nap. Or not. I don't know. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye.